Okay, had a few people ask me how to wire up the bed lights in the back of my 2015 Tacoma, how I did it, and just going to make a quick video here. It's an install video, but it's already been done, but it's simple enough where it should be all you need to know just to do it yourself. So you can see I got a mess of wires here. I have some ditch lights up here that I've been wiring up, so I haven't got these all sorted out yet, but it's going to be cleaned up here shortly. So here's my power. So this is the power from my ditch lights. I ran it off of a circuit that was for the heated seats that I don't have, so I had an extra circuit. And then for the actual bed lights, you ground them in the back the way I've done it at the back of the truck, so you only need power up here. So I got my I got my test light out and looked for a circuit that was hot all the time, and I found this one. It's just to the top of this 10 amp fuse here, and I'm trying to look. It doesn't actually have what it was supposed to be for in the fuse box. It's right here. Doesn't say, but it's always hot, and there's a female blade connector in there, so it worked out pretty well. So I just got an 18 gauge blade connector from O'Reilly's, AutoZone, wherever you want to get it, and just put it on the end of my 18 gauge power wire, and you can just plug it right in there. Now it's always good practice to go ahead and put a fuse in line, so I went ahead and did that. I had this laying around from another harness from another set of lights that had on a previous vehicle, so I just went ahead and popped that in line with a couple of butt connectors and some heat shrink tubing. And like I said, I'm going to button this up a little nicer and get it in some casing so it doesn't look so just thrown in here. And then you can, once you've done that, you can put your fuse cover back on. I'll do that in a minute. So when you get to this point, you're going to have to get it down to the back of the truck in some way. You could run it down below along the frame. I don't like doing that. It's not very clean, and your wire's just kind of laying in here. So I wanted to follow the factory harness back to the tail lights, and the easiest way I found to do that was just to run it through here. And this is the main wiring harness that runs into the cab from the engine compartment, and it's on the driver's side here. And if you just go ahead, you can see there's kind of a gap around the outside of it, and the boot's really thin back there, so you can just poke a wire through. And what I did is just took a piece of baling wire and just kind of took some dikes and cut it at an angle on the end so it was kind of sharp, and then just poked it on through. Just be careful to avoid your wires. It's not too much of a worry. It goes through pretty easy. And then what you'll do then is just electrical tape this wire to the back of that wire, to that baling wire or whatever you use, and pull this on into the cab. And once you get into the cab, it's a little dark in here, so it's kind of hard to see. See if I can get a better view of it. This is a terrible view, but it's pretty obvious. The boot comes through, you can see all the wires, and you'll just take your wire, and you can see mine's the red one here, and you'll just pull it on through. And you're gonna need quite a bit of wire to get to the back, so keep that in mind. So once you get that in there, you can just run it behind this kick plate. And the easiest way to do that, I found, instead of just removing that, it's not really necessary to remove it. Just pull a bunch of your wire through here like you're going to, and then just fish it around the edge, and then tuck it behind here. And once you get past this point down here with your wire, you can kind of pull it over and it'll fall back in behind there. You can pull this off if you want. I just didn't want to mess with it, and it worked fine without doing that. So now that you're to that point, you're going to want to remove this seal plate, and it just pops up. I've already kind of loosened it with one hand here before I started the video so I could get it off a little easier. But it just literally just take your thumb or something plastic so you don't scratch your paint, pop it up right here, and just lift it up. You'll hear the clips pop, and you can take it all the way off if you'd like to. You'll probably need to just to get it out of your way. You can just pop it on up. There's some clips back here, like so. You can see my wire coming out from behind there, and it runs along the wiring harness that's going to run back to the tail light area. And then you can see it kind of fishes on up through here under the carpet. You can take this white plastic clip loose if you like to, right here. It makes it a little easier. It's not necessary though. And then once you're to this point, you're gonna do the same thing like you did on the cab. You're gonna pop this wire down through another wiring boot. And I'll show you here. So here's the other boot where it runs back to the actual back of the truck. It's the same kind of boot. You're just gonna poke your baling wire through there, and then you're gonna pull your wire back through. And then once you're through, you're gonna just pull a bunch of excess wire so you can follow the wiring harness all the way back to the taillight area. And it gets a little tricky back by the rear wheel well. It gets kind of tight, but if you just pull it through without wire, throw a few zip ties on it so it's secure and not hanging loose, you'll be just fine. And then I will show you where we come up through the back. Once you get back here, you can see here's a spare tire. The wiring harness just keeps on coming back, and then you'll follow it over the top of the frame, and then you'll pop up in here where your driver's side tail light is. And I'll show you what to do up there here in just a second. Okay, so now once you get to this point, you'll have to remove the tail light, which is a pretty simple task. Just a 10mm socket, and you'll have a bolt. I'm hoping you can see this. You'll have a bolt here and a bolt here, and you're just gonna pop those out. Like so. And then there's two clips that kind of hold the light in. You're just gonna pull straight back on the light. So if you grab the bottom, it comes out pretty easy first. And then the top, and just pull. Well, I say it's easy. It was earlier. There you go. Okay. And then once that's loose, that's not really that terrible. I don't know why it was so difficult that time. So once that's loose, you can just let your light hang down to the side. Okay, so once you're in the tail light here, and yours might look different than mine, what I've done here is I brought my power up in and I've sent it back out to go to the other side, because my lights are two separate strands. You might get a strand that might be easier to run, you know, that goes all the way around, so you don't have to have two separate circuits. I just didn't want to have a wire going along the bulkhead, so I went this direction. And so I got my power coming up that we ran from the front engine compartment, and then I've tied in my positive wire on my LED lights, and then it's going back out to the other side to feed the other positive on the other LED lights. And then since I'm running two separate strands, I did a common ground wire for the most part. If you're not doing two separate ones, you'll just have your ground wire on your LEDs to run to the pin switch. But since I needed ground to the other side, I tied them together. So this is my common ground for the most part, and this is my ground for my LED wires, or LEDs. And then here's the back of the pin switch. And you can see the pin switch works by basically when the tailgate shuts, you can see there's this blade right here, and it's contacting the casing of the switch. And when you shut the tailgate, it pushes the pin and it removes the ground and then kills the lights. And that pin switch I've used here, you can see it has a rubber boot on it that when you tighten it down, it seals up against the truck so the water's not getting in there and corroding stuff. And you'll have to cut it shorter if you use the one I ordered, and it's made for that. It has there's little rings on the shaft that you can just cut with a pair of dikes. And if you can tell, I just barely have it sticking out past that rubber bump stop. And because if it was out further, it wouldn't go in far enough, because it does have a set amount of travel, but it goes in just far enough where it clears that bump stop and does its job. And you can see here, I went ahead and did a lock nut and a washer to hold that switch on. You could just do a self-tapper, but this is a lot better option. You don't have to worry about it coming loose or getting loose over time. Okay, so now that we're to that point, my wires themselves from my LEDs, you see here, okay, there is a gap. I apologize, I keep hitting the stop record button. There's a gap at the top of the where the bed rail meets the back here where the tail lights are housed. And you can fish that wire right up through that gap. And I hope you can see that. You can just take your wire, your baling wire from earlier, and pop it through there. I didn't really need to do that. I just pushed it through and I was able to get a hold of it on the outside. And I'll show you here. It comes through right here. And let's see if I can get some light on there. You can see the wire coming through. I think you can. Right there. And then I ran it behind this plastic piece here that has this, just this plastic plug that holds it in, or plastic clip. I ran it underneath there from behind and just kind of tucked it up there with the screwdriver. And then over to the bed, or to the cargo rail. And then what I did here on the lights, they just stick on with sticky pads. You can put a screw through them if you want to, if you're using the same lights I did. I just took these bolts loose on the cargo rails, and they are just a they're just a 30 or number 30 Torx, and you just pop those out. Not all the way. I just backed them out about a quarter of an inch on each one. And once you've done that, I think there's 4 of them on the short bed. Once you've done that, it gives you a little bit of play in this rail. It doesn't loosen it up completely. There must be some kind of adhesive behind it. But it gave me enough wiggle room to tuck my wires up behind it. And you can see there's barely sticking out. And then I went ahead and tightened my bolts back down, and it held them in there just perfect. So they're secure. They're not hanging down where they're gonna be in the way. This one is a little bit, I could have probably tucked it up a little bit better, but you know, it's out of the way for the most part. And then once you got to that point, you can just button up all the rest of your stuff here. Okay, and one more thing. I probably will be adding at some point a switch just to kill them all together if I don't want to have them on. Like right now, if I was doing some work back here, these would be on all the time. And which isn't really an issue if you're going to be doing work for a few hours. I mean, their LEDs are not going to pull too many amps off the battery. So if you want, I probably will do this. I'm probably going to end up putting a switch on here. There was another gentleman on the Facebook Tacoma group that had done this, and it's a good idea. And he just installed a switch here on the inside where it meets the tailgate area, where it poked through probably right in here somewhere. And you could do it up here, wherever. Just a waterproof push button, and he interrupted his ground again. So you could interrupt your ground, or you could interrupt your power wire. And I'll probably just do the power wire because I have plenty of it here. And I'll just probably run my incoming power to the switch and then back out. That way I can just kill it for all the time if I'd like to, and just go that route. And then I wanted to tell you here real quick too, when you're putting the tail lights back in, and just so you kind of know what you're fighting earlier, trying to get the tail light apart, there's just these 2 little clips here, and they go into these 2 areas. And so just when you're putting them back together, just line those back up, and you can kind of see when you're putting it back in. Just make sure that you're hitting those holes on both of them. There's just 2 of them. You see this one here. And then push it back together, and then you'll hear them clip and engage, and then you'll just put your bolts back in, obviously. And then on the seal plate, you'll have it off. I already put it back on, but you just put it back on the way you took it off. Just, there's a clip right here. You'll want to get started. It clips in from this direction, and then once you do that, lay it down, and then just take your hand and hammer it down, and you'll hear the clips. There's about one every, I don't know, 6 inches or so. Just hammer it down with your hand, and you'll hear them engage, and just you'll be able to tell if it's on there good or not. And then once you're done with that, just button up any wires you have loose anywhere else, and have fun. Like I said, I have a video also on the ditch light install. It's a little better than this video, I hope, but And I also have a video on the KC lights after dark. So if you'd like to look at that, feel free. And thanks for watching. Have fun doing your install.